I'm not going to define leadership, but I'm just going to quote a couple of people on leadership. Firstly, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who is the President of the United States. He said that the supreme quality for leadership is unquestionably integrity. Without it, no real success is possible, no matter whether it is on a section gang, a football field, in an army, or in an office. That was the President of the United States. Stephen Covey, who is one of the foremost authorities on business and integrity, had the following to say, and I think these are real wisdom. When conscience governs vision, discipline, and passion, leadership endures and changes the world for good. In other words, moral authority makes formal authority work. When conscience does not govern vision, discipline, and passion, leadership does not endure, nor do the institutions created by that leadership endure. In other words, formal authority without moral authority fails. Those are very, very powerful words. So when Leon, Eustace, and I brought our recommendation to Herman about who should talk on the subject of integrity and leadership, there was one person who stood above every other, and that was Archbishop Makgoba. He is a person who's devoted his life to the good of mankind, and I'd just like to give you a brief resume. He was elected Archbishop of the Anglican Church of Southern Africa in September 2007, taking up the position in January 2008. He is currently Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. He was ordained priest 23 years ago and a bishop 11 years ago. He is an eternal student. I think I'm correct in saying that, Your Grace. He holds a BSc, BA Honours and M Education from the University of Witwatersrand and a PhD from the University of Cape Town. He has received 2 honorary degrees from the General Theological Seminary of the Episcopal Church in New York City, May 2009, and Huron University College in May 2013. He previously lectured at Wits University and the Wits College of Education, where he was also Dean of Nokando residence. Over the past 3 years, he's given lectures to UCT MBA students on ethical leadership and stewardship, and his subject today is going to be ethics in leadership. He has been a panelist and leader discussion in various World Economic Forum sessions, so his work has been recognized on a global basis. He's published 2 books as well, and he serves on a number of NGO boards. Before asking the Archbishop to address us, and on behalf of our chairman, Herman Makgoba, it's a great honor and privilege for us to present to you, sir, our second Luminary Award. This is to the Most Reverend Dr. Thabo Makgoba for his lifelong dedication to all the peoples of South Africa and for ceaselessly demonstrating the highest level of integrity.
Thank you.
I would like to invite Dr. Makgoba to address us.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I feel very humbled by this gesture. I am not generally an anxious person, but each time I have to preach or I have to travel, I feel very fidgety the previous day, and my anxiety is don't miss the plane. So last night I was so anxious about missing the plane, such that I really struggled to sleep. And at around 4:30, sleep overtook me, and I said, let me just take a little nap. And lo and behold, I woke up at 8:15, and which was probably the time when I was supposed to land in Johannesburg. So I rushed to the airport and was put on the 22:10 flight, and I've just arrived. So my sincerest apologies for arriving late. But may I say how honored I am to be the recipient of the Free Market Foundation Luminary Award. I'm particularly humbled to be honored by you, as I know that those of us within the religious sector are generally not the strongest proponents of the free market. But I take it as a sign of your recognition that the market is just one player among many, and that all of us must have our place and adequate space to flourish freely, each playing our complementary roles if we are to contribute to a nation of flourishing individuals within flourishing communities. For to put my entire talk into a nutshell, this is for me the essence of what leadership and integrity of leadership is all about. It is about our commitment to promoting and delivering as far as possible through the appropriate use of the resources available to us, context and processes for human living that are in service of the people of this nation and this planet. And it is about paying particular attention to the well-being of those who are in greatest need and those who are least able to help themselves, generally through to no fault of their own. Furthermore, this is the task of all of us, not merely those who are obviously in the business of caring for the needy within society. And this is not just a moral question, though it is. But it is also the case that when everyone has a chance to live decently, this surely creates a context where business too does prosper. So I will be arguing that taking the moral course, at least in the long term, is actually in the best interest of the business community. And so let me now unpack these assertions in greater detail. My starting point is, not surprisingly, to consider what we mean by integrity. It is easy enough to look it up in the dictionary and discover that it comes from a Latin verb which means untouched, and so conveys wholeness, completeness, soundness, and coherence. When we look at it from the perspective of being citizens of South Africa, integrity in our behavior, whether in our personal or professional lives, is whatever contributes to making South Africa a whole country, a country of wholeness. After the woundedness of the past, our desire should be to work for greater healing and wholeness in the lives of individuals, in the lives of communities, in the life of the nation as a whole. How do we recognize such a wholeness? How do we measure it? Some of you may ask. Well, for me, one of the first places I go looking for answers is the Constitution, and particularly its preamble. I hope you know what it says. Indeed, I am very supportive of the proposal that all our learners should recite this preamble at school until they know it off by heart, and until the values it upholds and the goals it sets before us become an automatic part of our self-understanding of what it means to be a good South African. It is something I would like us all to read, mark, and inwardly digest so that it becomes an integral part. There's that integrity concept again in a different form. An integral part of the way we look at the world and the way we automatically act. In case it is not on the tip of your tongue, let me remind you of what the preamble says. It begins by recognizing the injustices of the past and that many suffered and struggled for justice, freedom, to build this new nation. It then affirms that we believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. A whole country is one which has a place for everyone, with all the distinctive differences that each of us bears, so that we may be enriched by all that we have as latent potential among us. It then goes on to describe the sort of nation we aspire to build through our constitutional democracy. So together we commit ourselves, and I quote, to heal the division of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. To lay the foundation for a democratic and open society in which government is based on the will of the people and every citizen is equally protected by law. To improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And to build a united and democratic South Africa able to take its rightful place as a sovereign state in the family of nations. And it ends, may God protect our people. So then, what makes for wholeness? What should we pursue if we want to be leaders of integrity? According to our Constitution, we should be using the following foundational or touchstone for our policy making, for our business plan, for our program setting. What helps heal past divisions? What strengthens democratic values and democratic practices? What promotes social justice and fundamental human rights? What improves the quality of life, not of some citizens, not of the already privileged few, but of all citizens? What frees the potential? What provides tangible, realizable opportunities to each and every person, not merely those who already have a good start in life? What helps us grow in a sense of unity, of belonging to one another, whether our differences are linguistic, cultural, racial, or educational and economic, while at the same time respecting those differences? All of these, in different ways, describe the sort of society which I spoke of earlier, of flourishing individuals in flourishing communities. It is about healthy living. I don't just mean physically healthy, but also emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, socially, culturally, health and wholeness. And here the Constitution in its Bill of Rights and in various other provisions, recognizes that such wholeness is rightly to be expressed by each of us in our own ways. So we should ensure there is dignity for all and the capacity to live out our own distinct characteristics, whether of ethnicity, language, culture, faith, gender, sexual orientation, or whatever, provided that in doing so, we allow equal space and opportunity for the flourishing of others. And here I want to ad lib and say we should be careful of Zulifying South Africa, because if we do that, we may end up with unintended consequences of what happened between the Tutsis and the Hutus. Now, in all this, perhaps some of you may be surprised that this cleric starts with the constitution of the country instead of the Bible. But let me turn to my sacred text. I know we are a broad audience, some of no faith, some of different faiths, but if you invite an archbishop, you are sure to get at least a dip into his sacred well. And that is what I also want to talk about, and to quote from our own sacred text, a verse that guides me to speak boldly and courageously into what I'm talking about. And that verse comes from John's Gospel, where Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. For me, then, the mark of integrity in leadership is preparedness to commit one's life in whatever field one finds himself to pursuing this abundant life. So let me now look at the other side of the coin, that which undermines this abundant life, that undermines this flourishing and wholeness within South Africa. It is easy to think of candidates for this litany of those that undermine this abundant life. For example, the whole Gupta saga and the attitude that let it happen. There is the Marikana tragedy and too many stories of police brutality. What makes them possible? And what about the Anene Boysen and the thousands and thousands of cases of gender violence that never make it to the newspapers? What about the scandal of the undelivered textbooks, mud schools, teachers who don't know their subject or won't pull their weight, or SADU that is more concerned about the teacher's plight than balancing it with the needs of the children? The list can go on, and you could paint the lists equally from the faith sector, from business, from academia, and other walks of life. But let us at least start by naming past legacies on the one hand, and the current weaknesses and the failings on the other. And I don't want to get into the polarizing issues that engulf, for example, the Trevor Manuel or Ruel Khoza, but I want to say, in listing these issues, the past and the current are intricately woven. We must acknowledge that the past has left us with a terrible legacy of poverty and inequality. But at the same time, the government has not done all that it might have to overcome these. There are practical reasons for this. We have inherited appalling skills shortages and capacity constraints. And sometimes politicians and civil servants at all levels of government, from national to local, have just felt overwhelmed by what they face and at loss to know where to begin. On this, they need encouragement from us, far more than our condemnation. But we know that corruption is a massive problem, indeed so endemic and habitual in some sectors that it is hard to know how to begin to deal with it. With this goes a wider loss of moral compass, which creates an atmosphere in which all sorts of dubious practices somehow become accepted. Leaders with integrity across all sectors, non-partisan, must join forces to face down this scourge, including through the protecting of whistleblowers within our own organizations. Integrity means creating contexts, promoting cultures where those who do good, who uphold moral high standards, are rewarded, even if it sets them against more narrowly self-serving practices that have become normative. There is a huge challenge to us around questions of what is merely getting away with the extremes of what the law will allow. This is very much what is underlying the issues about multinationals like Google and Amazon and the tax they pay in various European countries. Now, in one sense, they are not only within their rights, but entirely sensible to arrange their affairs within the law so that they pay the absolute minimum taxes that they need to. But we need to ask more fundamental questions about whether the sort of schemes that they and various government treasuries have allowed to develop are truly moral in the sense of not merely serving the shareholders, but the society in which they do business. Being on Facebook, it's something of a mixed blessing, as I'm sure many of you know. But now and again, amidst everything else, a phrase or two catches the eye and stimulates the mind. Preparing to come here, I read on Facebook, and I quote, "People were created to be loved, and things were created to be used. And the reason why the world in such a chaos today is that things are being loved and people being used." Well, it may be a bit simplistic, but we have to ask ourselves whether it does reflect a pernicious attitude that sometimes goes unchecked. And it challenges us also to ask ourselves whether we are behaving with integrity when, as global and national economic actors, the financial, business, and governance sectors develop ways of behaving that exacerbate the gulf between rich and poor. All around the world, the Gini coefficient has been going up. And here in South Africa, it is one of the worst places in the world. And it continues to get even worse. Integrity in leadership cannot just stand idly by and allow that to happen. The challenge to you and to me is how do we serve not only our owners and your shareholders' interest over the short term, but how do you do so in a way that also serves the interest of the nation and I mean all its citizens in the mid and long term? As I look at that horizon, I want to make mention of the National Development Plan with its visions for where we could be by the year 2030. It seems to me that this and other planning exercises, like, for example, the Dinokeng scenario, are entirely right when they say that we cannot only succeed in reaching our potential in becoming the healthy, whole society of which the Constitution speaks if we don't go forward together. As they have said, we need, as South Africans, to fly like flamingos. If we do not act together, we are bound to fail. Government, business, civil society, no one of us has the capacity to make the necessary differences on our own. We must each pull our weight and contribute to what we call constructive cooperation. Now, this raises the question of what we mean by constructive cooperation. It does not mean that we must give up criticizing and criticizing sharply when we believe government or the private sector or civil society has got it wrong. Government in particular needs to be aware of promoting a culture where it is unacceptable to speak out, whether they do so by means of the appalling protection of information legislation or through the stick and carrot of only granting contracts to friends. I was intrigued, and I need to apply my mind of what is happening at the Gauteng Water Board and the issues around how the tenders were won and are afforded to certain individuals. But what I want to say is, for all of us, the perspective of others, if we are to be helped, is quite critical. And this is where I hope in my particular vocation, I will continue to speak, as I trust a constructive critic and a critical friend is important in South Africa today. All of us need to hold one another to account. The private sector and civil society must hold government to account, but they too can ask the same high standards of us. We all need to be held accountable, above all else, to the standards and aspiration of the Constitution. This helps us to understand what it is for each of us to pursue integrity in our own sectors and in our own leadership. Does what we contribute to bringing our nation closer to the picture of the Constitution paints, or what we are doing is directed to some other goals? Those are the critical questions to ask. And as Archbishop, but also as a registered and professional psychologist and a qualified physical science teacher, I want to impress the importance to us of not losing sight of the wonderful vision of our Constitution. For it is all too easy to be bogged down in the negatives which overflow from the media. And then the risk is that we become so focused on the negatives that we lose sight of what we should truly be aiming for. And this drags us down. We need to set our mind and our wills on the best we can be together, on the integrity we seek, and make this the touchstone of our lives. If the good inhabits our imagination, if the good inhabits our souls, then it will find expression in our attitude, in our thinking, in our speaking, and in our acting. But the good and this positive vision should not be an aesthetic and drown down our critical voice. We should be deliberate and intentional in ensuring that a vision of a healthy, flourishing, engaged citizenry becomes the magnet that pulls all South Africans together, and to which our business plans, our program setting, our short-term, medium and long-term goals and planning are directed. This is what it means to live lives of integrity. Again, to dip from my sacred text, which has understood these psychological dynamics close to 2,000 years ago. There's a wonderful text written by St. Paul's to the people of Philippi, and Philippi is today's Turkey. And he writes, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. So then, let us not be clear in analyzing the difficulties that we face and the obstacles that need to be overcome. But as we do so, let us never take our eyes off the prize that lies ahead of us. Let us never become too downhearted and doubt that we can direct our lives to all that is good, all that promotes wholeness, and all that reflects integrity. For all of us can be leaders of integrity, people who promote the wholeness and flourishing of those around and across wider society and nation. It is becoming fashionable to talk about thought leaders, and certainly I believe that we need to get right our thinking, and more than that, our deep-seated, unspoken attitudes. And the right attitudes and the right thinking will lead to right words and right actions. So mental, moral, and spiritual integrity breeds trust. It breeds confidence. It breeds social cohesion. And these breeds the building blocks that are necessary to deliver wholeness in our nation. Of course, none of us is perfect, and our imperfections come in various ways. We may fail in our understanding. We may find that our decisions have negative consequences that we have failed to foresee. Sometimes we will exercise poor judgment in other ways, perhaps taking risks that we knew were unwise. We may also make poor choices out of weakness, but we can still aspire to integrity, and we can still encourage integrity in one another. Indeed, in contemporary society, we have a great need for people who can stand up and admit that they have made mistakes, and that they take responsibility for them, and that they are prepared to work to make reparations and to commit themselves to do better in the future. And my prayer was the government ministers that gave an audience to South Africa after the Gupta debacle, if one of them had said, sorry, we made a mistake, South Africans are wonderful people, they could have said, we forgive you, let's move on. But today in Parliament, we're going to debate how we cover that one. That is not integrity. The model that I'm promoting is we need to see more and more of people who says when they have fallen short of what they ought to be, can nonetheless take to heart and make a fresh start and persevere. This too is at the heart of demonstrating integrity in leadership. So then, to conclude, let all that diminishes our nation, our peoples, our society take second place. Let our commitment to integrity find expression in pursuing the glorious vision of healthy, whole, flourishing individuals in a healthy, wholesome society. This is the true legacy of our forefathers. For all that we battle with our difficult social and economic inheritance, this is the promise of 1994. This is the treasure that is ours to earn if we have the courage to reach for it. This is the treasure that integrity in leadership is all about. And so, let us strive for it together. I thank you once again.